Freedom! Oh, hey students, don't mind me. Today we're going to learn about Chapter 6, Lesson 3, and it covers a variety of subjects. We're going to talk about the War of the Revolution in the West. We're going to talk about the war on the sea, and we're also going to talk about the war in the South. So that's what we have going on for today. Let's start off with the West, shall we? An often unspoken part of the Revolutionary War was in the West. Not like California West, but like what was West at the time, like Western Pennsylvania, Illinois, places like that. What was frontier back then? The British had some outposts out that way, and they also had allies in the Native Americans. Now, you might remember that most of the Native Americans sided with the French during the French-Indian War, which wasn't all that long ago, but it is surmised that the Indians found that the colonists themselves were more of a threat to them, their land, and their lifestyles, more so than the British regulars were now. So that for the most part, they sided with British forces during the American Revolution. So to deal with this threat, a Virginian named George Rogers Clark went west with a colonial militia. They captured the British post at Kaskaskia and then the town of Vincennes, which was a British-controlled town. The British pushed back, retaking the town, but Clark and his force were able to retake the town yet again before hunkering down for the winter. And this pretty much solidified the colonial position in the West. There were problems out in the frontier. There was one British officer that was paying the natives for the scalps of American colonists. It was bloody, brutal business out there in the West. And there's more details that we could go into. We just don't have time for it again. So if you'd ever be interested in reading about the revolution in the West, there's plenty of information out there. Let's switch gears to the war at sea. The British had the most powerful navy in the world. They had the advantage on the sea for the entire war. They blockaded all American ports. In an attempt to combat this blockade, the Congress ordered 13 warships, but only 2 ever made it out to sea. Most Patriot maritime operations were conducted by privateers. Now, privateers could best be described as government-sanctioned pirates. They were basically private civilian ships outfitted with weapons whose purpose was to target British merchant and supply ships. Basically, pick on not the warships, but pick on the supply ships that were lightly armed and steal their stuff, and the sailors would basically get money for capturing ships. So like if you captured a merchant vessel and you were a midshipman, there was a set amount of money, a percentage that you would make from that. So there was no shortage of sailors in the colonies that wanted to get into the lucrative business of privateering. There is one distinct naval hero that came out of the Revolution. John Paul Jones and his ship basically defeated the British warship Serapis in the open seas off the coast of Britain. Britain doesn't lose a lot of naval battles, so it was a big deal, and even though it was like one victory among a whole lot of losses, it was a good morale booster for the patriotic cause. And there's, I think, at least one movie, but probably multiple movies on John Paul Jones. You could probably find them on YouTube. In fact, I know you can. It's broken down into like 6 or 9 chunks. So if you're into that old-time naval warfare, you can definitely learn a whole lot more about John Paul Jones. Here he is, yelling some smack colonial style. He's probably his depiction of yelling, "I have not yet begun to fight." Let's move into the South, because that's where the British had some early successes. The British actually thought that they were going to have more success in the South because there were a lot of loyalists in the South. They thought they'd have more support, and they focused their efforts there for a while. They met with initial success, taking towns like, major cities like Charleston and Savannah. They won all the conventional battles, like where everyone lines up, but they found themselves having difficulty controlling the territory because they were getting hit with militia doing what's called hit-and-run tactics, or guerrilla warfare, where basically they would ambush the British pop out of the swamp, shoot a few British guys, and then run away without actually being engaged in long-term combat. It was kind of new at that time and definitely looked down upon by traditionalists like the British, but it worked. They also had a habit of targeting the officers, so the guys in charge, which would mess up all the men underneath of them. One such man was Francis Marion. He was a colonial leader down there. They called him the Swamp Fox because he would attack from the swamp and then disappear like a ghost. If you've ever seen the movie The Patriot, it kind of draws a lot of, with Mel Gibson, they kind of draw a lot on this idea of the war in the South and the guerrilla warfare, and some other things we're going to talk about later in this lesson. So the tide starts to turn in the South. They have those initial victories, but they're having trouble dealing with these hit-and-run tactics from these militia. And then the icing on the cake for them is Spain declares war on Britain in 1779, essentially sending a lot of supplies to colonial forces and driving the British out of the Gulf of Mexico and sort of doing battle with them in what would become like Louisiana in the south there. But this decision, in the book it doesn't go into much detail. It does mention specifically that Spain had no official alliance with the colonies. It was just sort of declared war on Britain, and part of it was Spain was allied with France, and France was allied with the colonies, and France and Spain were kind of always at war with Britain. So it was less of we're allies now and more like you're the friend of a friend and the enemy of an enemy, and we just so happen to be fighting the same person at the same time, so I'm going to help you out a little bit. That's really what it was, and France was kind of driving them to do it as well. More trouble for the British arose from their questionable methods in the Carolinas. They basically rolled around towns trying to scare everyone, saying that if you supported the patriot cause, we were going to hang you and kill your family and burn your towns to the ground. And these people actually had been neutral. They were neither patriots nor loyalists, but they were a hardy folk and fiercely independent. So when the Brits rolled in talking like this, it sort of made them angry. And then they ended up forming their own militia and defeating a sizable British force at a place called King's Mountain, which is pictured down here. These questionable tactics that the British used in the South, they essentially shot themselves in the foot. They weren't making any friends. They weren't winning hearts and minds. They were actually going around threatening and making enemies. And this whole series of events between the threats and then the victory at King's Mountain of these basically new patriotic forces did a lot to make the South less of a stronghold of loyalists and turn a lot of them into the patriot cause. Things continue to go downhill for the British in the South. A new commander of American forces in the South, Nathaniel Greene, he took command over from Horatio Gates, and he split his forces, with some going on to defeat the British at a place called Cowpens, and some more working with Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox. They recombined to have a battle against British General Cornwallis in what's called the Gulliford Courthouse, which is now Greensboro, North Carolina. Cornwallis lost, but he suffered a lot of casualties, and sort of decided he needed to head a little north into Virginia. Washington saw this movement happening, and he sent some more forces from the north down to the south to check Cornwallis, and Cornwallis was like, oh, time to hunker down in Yorktown. And that's pretty much where we're going to end this lesson. The British forces under Cornwallis in the south are kind of on the run. They hunker down at Yorktown. We're going to finish this war up in the next chapter, or rather in the next lesson. The last lesson of the chapter would be lesson 4. So it's all sort of coming to a head. We're sort of in the zenith of the whole war right here. And we're going to finish up tomorrow. Or is it Friday? Which means the next lesson. Regardless, go ahead. Your assignment is a little different today. It's a bunch of questions that you actually have to write out. It's not not multiple choice. Please be sure to answer in complete sentences. And remember, more is better. Alright, I'll talk to you guys later. Let me know if you need anything.